Please take it. You need it more than I do.
Raymond Walker slid his only breakfast, a small egg sandwich and coffee, across the diner table to the trembling homeless woman wrapped in a tattered coat. His 8-year-old daughter Sophie looked up at him with wide eyes. "But Dad, you didn't eat yesterday either." The woman's dirt-smudged hands hesitated over the food, tears streaming down her face. What Raymond didn't know was that this homeless woman was Elena Taylor, a billionaire CEO conducting an undercover social experiment, and his single act of kindness was about to trigger a chain of events that would transform everything. 3 weeks later, Raymond's world would change forever when 3 lawyers in expensive suits appeared at his warehouse job with an offer that seemed impossible. Raymond Walker had learned the cruel mathematics of poverty with painful precision. At 38 years old, his life had become an exhausting calculation of sacrifices, each day a careful equation balancing his daughter's needs against his own survival. The math was brutal and unforgiving. His warehouse job at Portland Distribution Center paid $16.50 per hour, just enough to keep them housed in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment in the deteriorating Lentz neighborhood, but never enough to get ahead. After rent, $1,200, utilities, $180, Sophie's school supplies and clothes, and the bare minimum for food, there was nothing left. Some months, there wasn't even enough for that. Raymond had mastered the art of going without. He could stretch a bag of rice for a week, make a single box of pasta feed them both for days. He'd perfected the technique of eating just enough to keep working. A handful of crackers before his shift, a piece of fruit at lunch if he was lucky, saving the real meal for Sophie when she came home from school. His body had become a living testament to his sacrifices. At 6 feet tall, he dropped from a healthy 180 pounds to a gaunt 155. His clothes hung loose on his frame, his cheekbones had become prominent, and dark circles shadowed his eyes from the constant exhaustion of working 50-hour weeks while running on minimal food and sleep. But Raymond had learned to hide it. He'd perfected the bright smile for Sophie, the reassuring voice that told her everything was fine, the careful misdirection when she asked why he wasn't eating. "I had a big lunch at work," he'd lie, watching her devour the simple dinner he'd prepared. "You eat up, sweetheart. Growing girls need their energy." The truth was darker and more desperate. Raymond had been skipping meals for 3 months straight, not occasionally, systematically. He ate perhaps 1 small meal every other day, just enough to keep his body functioning for his physical warehouse job. The rest went to Sophie. His daughter was everything. She was the reason he woke up at 5 a.m. despite the bone-deep exhaustion. She was the reason he pushed through 10-hour shifts, loading and unloading trucks, even when his malnourished body screamed for rest. She was the reason he kept going when everything felt impossible. Sophie didn't know the full extent of their situation. At 8 years old, she understood they didn't have much money, that they couldn't afford new toys or eating out like other kids did. But Raymond worked hard to shield her from the crushing reality of their poverty. She didn't know that her father was starving himself to feed her. She didn't know that he'd been wearing the same 3 work shirts for 2 years, washing them by hand each night because they couldn't afford the laundromat. She didn't know that her father lay awake most nights, stomach cramping with hunger, doing mental calculations. Could they afford Sophie's winter coat and his blood pressure medication? Could they keep the heat on and still buy her the school field trip permission slip? Every decision felt like choosing between bad options and worse ones. Raymond's wife, Michelle, had died 4 years ago from complications during emergency surgery for a ruptured appendix. The medical bills had devastated them, wiping out their small savings and plunging Raymond into debt he was still trying to climb out of. Michelle had been the stable one, the nurse with the steady income and health insurance. When she died, everything collapsed. He'd tried to rebuild, but single parenthood on a warehouse wage in an increasingly expensive city was a losing battle. He'd applied for better jobs, hundreds of them, but his lack of college education closed door after door. He'd looked into assistance programs, but navigated a Byzantine system that seemed designed to humiliate and exhaust rather than help. So Raymond had adapted. He'd become an expert at survival. He knew which grocery stores marked down meat and produce at exactly 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. He knew how to make a crock-pot of beans last for multiple meals. He knew how to smile and tell Sophie they were having breakfast for dinner, when the truth was, he'd run out of money 3 days before payday. His co-workers at the warehouse didn't know the extent of his struggle. Raymond was proud, maybe too proud, and good at hiding his situation. He joked and laughed during breaks, deflected questions about his weight loss with comments about trying to get in shape, and never, ever accepted their offers to buy him lunch or coffee. But the physical toll was becoming undeniable. He'd started getting dizzy during shifts, his hands trembling when he lifted boxes. His supervisor had pulled him aside twice, concerned about his performance. "You okay, Walker? You seem off lately." Raymond had blamed allergies, lack of sleep, anything but the truth. He was slowly starving. The morning that would change everything started like any other brutal day. Raymond had woken at 5 a.m. after 3 hours of restless sleep, his empty stomach aching. He'd gotten Sophie ready for school, making her scrambled eggs and toast while he had nothing but black coffee, claiming he wasn't hungry. After dropping Sophie at school, he'd had 3 hours before his warehouse shift started at noon. He'd been walking through downtown Portland, trying to kill time without spending money, when he realized he was getting dangerously lightheaded. He hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days. Raymond made a rare decision. He'd go to Rosie's Diner on 82nd Avenue and spend $4.50 on their breakfast special, a small egg sandwich and coffee. It would mean going without lunch tomorrow, but he needed something in his system or he'd collapse at work and lose his job. That was the constant fear. One mistake, one sign of weakness, and he'd lose the only income keeping them afloat. The diner was nearly empty at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Raymond slid into a worn booth, ordered his breakfast and sat waiting, trying to ignore the gnawing hunger that had become his constant companion. That's when he saw her. The woman who shuffled into Rosie's Diner looked like she'd been living on the streets for months. Her clothes were layers of tattered, dirt-stained fabrics, an oversized coat with missing buttons over what might have once been a sweater, torn jeans, shoes held together with duct tape. Her hair was matted and dirty, her face smudged with grime, and her hands were wrapped in fingerless gloves with holes. She moved with the defeated posture Raymond recognized from other homeless people he'd seen in Portland, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast, trying to make herself small and invisible. She approached the counter hesitantly, speaking to the waitress in a voice barely above a whisper. Raymond couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw the waitress shake her head firmly, pointing toward the door. The homeless woman's shoulders sagged further. She turned to leave, and that's when Raymond saw her face fully. The exhaustion, the desperation, the hollow look of someone who'd lost hope. Something cracked open in Raymond's chest. He knew that look. He'd seen variations of it in his own mirror for years. He understood what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be seen as less than human because of circumstances beyond your control. "Excuse me," Raymond called out before he could think better of it. "Ma'am?" The woman turned, her eyes widening in surprise that anyone was speaking to her. Raymond gestured to the seat across from him in the booth. "Would you like to join me? I just ordered breakfast, but I'm not that hungry. I'd be happy to share." The woman stared at him, clearly suspicious. People didn't do things like this, not for people who looked like her. "It's okay," Raymond said gently. "No strings attached. You just look like you could use a meal." She approached slowly, cautiously, sliding into the booth while watching him carefully, ready to bolt if this was some kind of trick or cruelty. The waitress arrived with Raymond's egg sandwich and coffee, setting them down with a disapproving look at the new addition to the table. Raymond ignored her judgment. He pushed the plate and coffee cup across the table toward the woman. "Please take it. You need it more than I do." That's when the diner door chimed, and Sophie walked in with her friend's mom, Mrs. Patterson, who'd offered to pick Sophie up from the school nurse's office. She'd felt sick during class, and they'd called Raymond's emergency contact. Sophie ran to the booth, concern on her young face. "Dad, Mrs. Patterson said you were here. I don't feel good." She noticed the untouched breakfast in front of the homeless woman, then looked at her father's empty space at the table. Her 8-year-old brain made the connection instantly. "But Dad, you didn't eat yesterday either," Sophie said, her voice small and worried. Raymond's face flushed. He hadn't meant for Sophie to know how often he skipped meals. He forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetie. I had a big meal at work yesterday. This nice lady needs it more than me right now." The homeless woman's dirt-smudged hands hesitated over the food, tears suddenly streaming down her face, cutting clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks. You don't have enough for yourself, and you're giving me your food." "Everyone deserves kindness," Raymond said simply. "Everyone deserves to eat." The woman's hands trembled as she reached for the sandwich. She took a small bite, then another, eating slowly, as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Tears continued flowing down her face. Mrs. Patterson watched the scene with visible discomfort, clearly wanting to leave. She put a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "Raymond, I can take Sophie home and stay with her until you're done with work if you need." Raymond nodded gratefully, squeezing Sophie's hand. "Thank you. I'll be home by 6. After they left, Raymond sat across from the homeless woman, watching her eat his breakfast, his only meal. He didn't feel noble or saintly. He just felt tired and hungry, and like he'd done the only thing a decent human being could do. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The woman looked up, still chewing, tears still falling. People call me Ellie." "I'm Raymond. It's nice to meet you, Ellie." She finished the sandwich and drank the coffee slowly, savoring every drop. When she was done, she looked at Raymond with an intensity that seemed almost out of place with her appearance. "You gave me your only food," she said quietly. "You're hungry. Your daughter knows you don't eat, and you still gave it to me." Raymond shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "We've all got to look out for each other. That's how we survive." "Why?" Ellie pressed. "Most people wouldn't even see me. They look right through people like me. Why did you help?" Raymond was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to put it into words. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible. I know what it's like when the system fails you, and nobody seems to care if you live or die. I know what it's like to be hungry and desperate and feel like the world has forgotten you exist." He met her eyes directly. "I see you. You're not invisible to me. You're a person who deserves dignity and kindness, just like everyone else." Fresh tears spilled down Ellie's face. She reached across the table and gripped Raymond's hand with surprising strength. "You're a good man, Raymond Walker." He hadn't told her his last name. Before Raymond could process that detail, Ellie stood up from the booth. "Thank you. You'll never know what this meant to me." She walked out of the diner, and Raymond sat there for another few minutes, trying to ignore his cramping stomach before heading to his warehouse shift, late now, hoping his supervisor would understand. What Raymond didn't know was that Ellie wasn't homeless at all. Elena Taylor was one of the wealthiest self-made women in America. At 36 years old, she was the founder and CEO of Taylor Tech Solutions, a software company she'd built from her college dorm room into a billion-dollar enterprise. Forbes estimated her net worth at $3.2 billion. But Elena's wealth had created a profound problem. She'd become completely isolated from the reality most people lived in. Surrounded by other billionaires, tech executives, and yes-men who agreed with everything she said, Elena had begun to feel disconnected from the world, questioning whether genuine human kindness still existed. She'd grown up poor, raised by a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them housed and fed. Elena remembered what it felt like to be hungry, to be looked down on, to be treated as less than because of her economic status. Those memories had driven her success, fueling her determination to never be powerless again. But somewhere along the way to billions, Elena realized she'd lost touch with something essential. She couldn't remember the last time someone had been kind to her without wanting something in return. Every interaction felt transactional. Every relationship felt performative. So she'd designed an experiment. For the past 6 months, Elena had been conducting what she called the Humanity Project. With the help of a professional makeup artist and costume designer, she would transform herself into a homeless person and spend days on the streets of different American cities, documenting how people treated her. The results had been devastating. In Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, and New York, Elena had been ignored, insulted, kicked, spat on, and treated with casual cruelty that shocked her to her core. People stepped over her. They called her names. They told her to get a job while she begged. Security guards chased her away from storefronts. Restaurant owners threatened to call police when she asked for water. In 6 months, across 5 major cities, only 7 people had shown her genuine kindness. 7 people out of tens of thousands she'd encountered. Portland was meant to be her final test city before concluding the project. She'd been on the streets for 4 days, sleeping in her car at night, with her security team watching from a distance, and spending days navigating the city as Ellie, a homeless woman. The results had been consistent with other cities: indifference at best, cruelty at worst. Until Raymond Walker. Elena had entered Rosie's diner genuinely hungry, having not eaten that morning to maintain authenticity. She'd approached the counter knowing she'd likely be rejected. That was the pattern. When the waitress dismissed her, Elena had prepared to leave and try another location. Then Raymond had called out to her. What happened next had shaken Elena to her core. She'd sat across from this man who was clearly struggling himself. She could see the signs of malnourishment, the worn clothes, the exhaustion, and watched him give her his only meal without hesitation. When his daughter had walked in and revealed that Raymond hadn't eaten yesterday either, Eleanor had nearly broken character. This man was starving himself, and he'd still given his food to a stranger. In that moment, Eleanor had found what she'd been searching for: proof that genuine human goodness still existed. Not transactional kindness, not performative charity. Real, selfless compassion from someone who had nothing to give but gave anyway. After leaving the diner, Eleanor had returned to her downtown hotel suite, removed her disguise, and immediately called her head of security and her lead attorney. "I need a full background check on Raymond Walker," she'd said, her voice still thick with emotion. "Everything. His employment, his financial situation, his history. I need to know his life story." "Already on it," her security chief Marcus Chen had replied. He'd been monitoring all her Humanity Project interactions from a distance, recording everything. Within 3 hours, Eleanor had a comprehensive file on Raymond Walker. What she read had made her cry. Raymond's wife Michelle had died, leaving behind crushing medical debt. Raymond had been working brutal hours at minimum wage, trying to provide for his daughter. He was 3 months behind on rent, facing eviction. His bank account had 47 bills. He had been systematically starving himself to feed his daughter for months, and he'd given his only meal to a stranger. Elena had made her decision immediately. She'd called her team of lawyers into the hotel conference room that evening. "I want to change this man's life," she'd said simply. "Get creative. I want comprehensive, life-changing help, but I want it done in a way that preserves his dignity. No handouts that feel like charity. Create opportunities that feel earned." Her attorneys had worked through the night, crafting a plan. 3 weeks later, everything was ready. Raymond was loading a pallet of boxed electronics onto a truck when his supervisor, Jerry, called out from across the warehouse floor. "Walker, someone here to see you. Conference room." Raymond's stomach dropped. Nobody visited the warehouse looking for individual workers unless it was bad news. His first thought was, Sophie. Had something happened at school? He hurried to the small conference room near the main office, his heart pounding. 3 people in expensive business suits stood waiting, 2 men and 1 woman, all carrying leather briefcases and tablets. "Mr. Raymond Walker," the older man said, extending his hand. "My name is Douglas Chen, and these are my colleagues, Patricia Simmons and James Park. We're attorneys representing the Taylor Foundation. Do you have a few minutes to speak with us?" Raymond shook the offered hand, confusion replacing his initial panic. "Is something wrong? Am I in trouble?" "Quite the opposite," Patricia Simmons said with a warm smile. "May we sit?" They sat around the cheap conference table, and Douglas opened his briefcase, pulling out a folder. "Mr. Walker, 3 weeks ago, you performed an extraordinary act of kindness for a woman you believed to be homeless at Rosie's Diner on 82nd Avenue. Raymond's brow furrowed. "Ellie, is she okay? Did something happen?" "The woman you knew as Ellie was actually Elena Taylor," Douglas said carefully. "She's the CEO of Taylor Tech Solutions and founder of the Taylor Foundation, one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country." Raymond stared at them blankly, not comprehending. James Park pulled out a tablet, turning it to show Raymond a photo. It was Elena Taylor, polished, professional, confident, and Raymond could barely reconcile this image with the desperate homeless woman he'd met. "Ms. Taylor has been conducting a social experiment," Patricia explained. "For 6 months, she's been visiting cities in disguise to observe how people treat society's most vulnerable. In that entire time, across thousands of interactions, you are one of only 8 people who showed genuine, selfless kindness." Raymond's head was spinning. "I don't understand. Why are you telling me this?" Douglas leaned forward. "Because Ms. Taylor was deeply moved by your actions, Mr. Walker. When she learned about your personal circumstances, your financial struggles, your dedication to your daughter, your consistent character despite incredible hardship, she became determined to help you. The Taylor Foundation has a program called Second Chances," Patricia continued. "We identify individuals who demonstrate exceptional character and provide them with opportunities to transform their lives. Mr. Walker, we'd like to offer you a position." She slid a document across the table. Raymond picked it up with shaking hands, scanning the text. His eyes caught on numbers that seemed impossible. This is a job offer. "Director of Community Outreach for the Taylor Foundation, Portland office," James confirmed. "Your role would involve identifying individuals and families in need, developing support programs, and building partnerships with local organizations to maximize our community impact." Raymond's eyes were locked on the salary figure. $78,000 per year, with full benefits including comprehensive health insurance, retirement matching, and tuition assistance. "This can't be real," Raymond whispered. "I don't have any college education. I don't have experience in this kind of work. Why would you—" "You have something far more valuable," Douglas interrupted gently. "You have genuine empathy, lived experience with poverty, and demonstrated character. Those qualities can't be taught. We can teach you the administrative and organizational skills you'll need. The rest you already have." Patricia placed another document on the table. "Additionally, the Taylor Foundation would like to provide immediate assistance while you transition to your new position. We're prepared to offer a $15,000 emergency grant to address your current financial crisis, paying your back rent, catching up your utilities, and providing a buffer while you get stable." Raymond felt tears burning his eyes. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. "There's more," James said, his voice kind. "The position includes a housing allowance. We have a 3-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District that you and your daughter could move into immediately, rent-free for the first year, while you establish financial stability." "Why?" Raymond's voice broke. "I just bought someone breakfast. That's not worth all this." Douglas Chen's expression grew serious. "Mr. Walker, in 6 months of searching, Ms. Taylor found only 8 people who treated a stranger with genuine kindness when there was nothing to gain. You didn't just buy someone breakfast. You gave your only meal to a stranger when you were starving yourself. Your 8-year-old daughter revealed that you hadn't eaten the day before, and you still gave away your food. That level of selfless compassion is extraordinary," Patricia added. "Ms. Taylor believes the world needs more people like you in positions where they can make a difference. This isn't charity. This is an investment in the kind of humanity she's trying to preserve and cultivate." Raymond sat in stunned silence, staring at the documents. His entire life was contained in these pages, a way out of the brutal cycle of poverty, a chance to provide for Sophie, an opportunity to do meaningful work helping others. "I don't know what to say," he finally managed. "Say yes," Douglas smiled. "Start Monday. Change your life." Raymond looked up at the 3 attorneys, seeing genuine warmth in their expressions. He thought about Sophie, about the chance to give her the stability and security she deserved. He thought about his empty stomach and his cramping hands and the exhaustion that had become his baseline existence. He thought about the woman in the diner who'd seen something in him worth saving. "Yes," Raymond whispered. "Yes, thank you." The next 6 months were the most transformative of Raymond Walker's life. Moving into the Pearl District apartment felt like stepping into a different universe. The 3-bedroom unit had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a modern kitchen with appliances that actually worked, and enough space for Sophie to have her own room, a luxury she'd never experienced. On their first night in the new apartment, Sophie had run from room to room, her face glowing with joy. "Dad, I have my own room with a real bed, and there's a bathtub. Can I take a bubble bath?" Raymond had watched his daughter's pure happiness and felt something crack open in his chest, relief and joy so intense it was almost painful. This was what he'd been fighting for. This was why he'd endured years of suffering. Starting the job at the Taylor Foundation had been intimidating. Raymond had no experience with non-profit work, no understanding of grant systems or community partnership frameworks. But the foundation had paired him with a mentor, a woman named Carla Rodriguez, who'd been with the organization for 8 years. "You're not here because of your resume," Carla had told him on his first day. "You're here because you understand what it's like to need help. That perspective is invaluable. Everything else, we'll teach you." And they did. Raymond absorbed everything, learning database systems, grant application processes, partnership development strategies. He discovered he had a natural talent for connecting with people, for understanding their needs, and for designing programs that actually helped. His role involved visiting communities, meeting with families in crisis, and identifying ways the Taylor Foundation could provide meaningful support. Unlike traditional charity that created dependency, the foundation focused on creating pathways to stability, job training, housing assistance, childcare support, education programs. Raymond threw himself into the work with passionate dedication. Every family he helped felt personal. He saw himself in every struggling parent, saw Sophie in every child who was hungry or scared or ashamed of their circumstances. Within 3 months, Raymond had developed and launched a program called Portland Parent Support Network, a comprehensive system connecting single parents with resources, job opportunities, and community support. The program served 150 families in its first quarter, Elena Taylor noticed. She'd been watching Raymond's progress through regular reports from the Portland office. She'd seen his dedication, his innovative thinking, his genuine commitment to the mission. But she'd kept her distance, wanting to give him space to grow into his new role without the pressure of her presence. 5 months after the lawyers had visited the warehouse, Eleanor made the decision to visit the Portland office herself. Eleanor Taylor walked into the Portland Taylor Foundation office on a Friday afternoon in November. She'd deliberately not announced her visit, wanting to see the operation organically rather than a staged performance for the CEO. The office was buzzing with activity. Staff members were working at desks, phones were ringing. A group was gathered around a conference table discussing what looked like program metrics. And there, in the corner office with the door open, was Raymond Walker. He'd changed dramatically from the gaunt, exhausted man Eleanor had met at Rosie's diner. Raymond had gained back healthy weight, the dark circles under his eyes had faded, and he carried himself with new confidence. But what struck Elena most was his expression, focused, engaged, alive in a way he hadn't been before. He was on the phone, speaking with gentle authority. "I understand, Mrs. Chen. I've been in your exact situation. Here's what we're going to do. I'm sending you the application for our emergency housing fund today, and I'm personally going to walk it through the system. You'll have an answer by Wednesday. Your kids are not going to be on the streets, I promise you." Elena felt her throat tighten with emotion. This was why she'd done it. This was what was possible when you invested in human potential. She knocked on the doorframe. Raymond looked up and for a moment didn't recognize her. Then his eyes widened in shock. "Ms. Taylor," he stammered, standing quickly and nearly knocking over his coffee. "I didn't know you were visiting. Nobody told me." "That was intentional," Elena smiled, walking into his office. "I wanted to see the real operation, not a show. May I sit?" "Of course, please." Raymond gestured to the chair across from his desk, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm sorry. I never properly thanked you for what you did for me and Sophie. I don't even know where to begin." Elena sat, studying him. "You don't need to thank me, Raymond. You earned this opportunity. I just opened a door. You walked through it and proved you belonged here." "I've been reading your reports," she continued. "The Parents Support Network is impressive. You've helped 150 families in 3 months. That's remarkable." Raymond relaxed slightly, his passion for the work overcoming his nervousness. "Those families were me 6 months ago. I know exactly what they need because I lived it. The system is broken. There's no coordination between services. Application processes are deliberately complicated, and people are treated like problems instead of human beings. I'm just trying to fix what I experienced." "Tell me about it," Elena said, leaning forward. "Tell me what you're seeing." For the next hour, they talked. Raymond shared stories of families he'd helped, explained the gaps he was seeing in social services, described programs he wanted to develop. Elena listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, challenging some assumptions, encouraging bold ideas. She found herself captivated not just by his ideas, but by him, his authenticity, his passion, his refusal to accept that poverty was inevitable or unsolvable. He spoke with the moral authority of someone who'd survived the system and was determined to transform it. "You remind me of myself," Elena said quietly when he paused. "When I was starting Taylor Tech, everyone told me I was naive. They said the tech industry was too competitive, that someone from my background couldn't compete with Stanford and MIT graduates. But I had something they didn't. I'd been hungry. I'd been underestimated. And that gave me a different kind of motivation. Raymond nodded. That's exactly it. I'm not smarter than people who went to college, but I understand what it feels like to be invisible. I know what it's like when nobody sees your potential. That's why I fight so hard for these families, because I remember. Their eyes met across the desk, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, respect, a connection deeper than professional admiration. The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. Carla Rodriguez poked her head in. Raymond, sorry to interrupt, but Sophie's school just called. She's fine, but she forgot her permission slip for the field trip, and she's upset. They need you to bring it. Raymond immediately stood. I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor. I need to go, Elena said warmly. Your daughter comes first. Always. Raymond grabbed his jacket, then hesitated. Would you like to meet her? Sophie's school is just 10 minutes away, and she's heard so much about you. She calls you the Angel Lady. Eleanor felt her heart squeeze. I'd love to meet her. 20 minutes later, Elena Taylor, billionaire CEO, found herself sitting in an elementary school hallway, waiting while Raymond delivered the permission slip. When he emerged from the classroom, a blonde girl with bright eyes bouncing beside him, Elena stood. Sophie, this is Ms. Taylor, Raymond said gently. Sophie stared up at Elena with the unfiltered intensity only children possessed. Then she walked forward and wrapped her arms around Elena's waist in a tight hug. Thank you for saving my daddy, Sophie whispered. He's not sad anymore. Eleanor knelt down to Sophie's level, tears pricking her eyes. Your daddy saved himself, sweetheart. He's an extraordinary man. You're very lucky to have him. I know, Sophie said seriously. He's the best daddy in the whole world. That night, Elena returned to her hotel and couldn't stop thinking about Raymond and Sophie, about the transformation she'd witnessed, about the connection she'd felt, about Raymond's passion and integrity. She'd helped hundreds of people through her foundation, but none had affected her like this. Raymond's new life seemed almost too perfect. The job was fulfilling, Sophie was thriving in her new school, and he'd finally achieved the stability he'd desperately fought for years to obtain. But his work at the Taylor Foundation had made him an enemy, though he didn't know it yet. Marcus Thornton was a 52-year-old real estate developer who'd built his fortune by exploiting Portland's housing crisis. His company, Thornton Properties, specialized in buying up low-income apartment buildings, evicting tenants on technicalities, then renovating and renting the units at triple the previous cost. It was legal, barely, and it was making him rich. Over the past 5 years, Thornton had displaced over 2,000 families in Portland, directly contributing to the homelessness crisis while profiting enormously. Raymond's parents' support network had become a major obstacle to Thornton's business model. The program included tenant legal advocacy, helping families fight unjust evictions and holding landlords accountable for code violations. Raymond had personally helped stop 12 eviction proceedings in the past 2 months, costing Thornton over $400,000 in delayed projects. Thornton had tried subtle pressure first, calling the Taylor Foundation board with vague complaints about aggressive advocacy, implying liability concerns. But the foundation had backed Raymond completely, so Thornton decided to get personal. He hired a private investigator to dig into Raymond's background, looking for anything compromising. What he found was Raymond's past financial desperation, and Thornton decided to weaponize it. On a Tuesday morning, Raymond arrived at his office to find an envelope on his desk with no return address. Inside was a letter on expensive stationery. Mr. Walker, I've become aware that you accepted a large sum of money and employment from Elena Taylor after a brief encounter. Some might view this arrangement as inappropriate. I'd hate for questions to arise about the nature of your relationship with Ms. Taylor, or whether you obtained your position through legitimate means. Perhaps we should discuss how to avoid such unfortunate speculation. I'll be in touch. MT. Raymond's hands trembled as he read the letter. The implication was crystal clear. Thornton was threatening to create a scandal, suggesting Raymond had somehow manipulated or seduced Elena for financial gain. It was disgusting and absurd, but Raymond knew that rumors didn't need to be true to be destructive. He'd worked too hard, and Elena had invested too much for him to become a liability. His first instinct was to resign, to remove himself before Thornton could damage the foundation or Elena's reputation. But when he called Carla to discuss the situation, she immediately shut down that idea. "Absolutely not," Carla said firmly. "This is extortion, Raymond. We're calling the lawyers, now." Within 2 hours, Douglas Chen and Patricia Simmons were in Raymond's office reviewing the letter. Within 4 hours, they'd identified Marcus Thornton as the sender, and within 6 hours, Elena Taylor herself was on a plane to Portland. Elena stormed into the Portland office at 7 p.m. that evening, fury radiating from her like heat. She'd been in a San Francisco meeting when Douglas had called with the news, and she'd left immediately. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Conference room," Carla said. "He's been in there for 3 hours trying to draft a resignation letter." Elena's jaw clenched. She walked to the conference room and opened the door without knocking. Raymond sat at the table, his head in his hands, surrounded by crumpled paper. He looked up when she entered, and Elena saw the defeated expression on his face, the same look he'd had at the diner 6 months ago. "You're not resigning," Elena said, closing the door behind her. "I have to," Raymond said, his voice hollow. "If Thornton starts spreading rumors about us, it'll destroy your reputation. It'll undermine everything the Foundation does. People will think I slept my way into this job, that you're some kind of—" "Stop," Elena commanded. "Listen to me very carefully, Raymond. Marcus Thornton is a predatory criminal who's displaced thousands of families and profited from human misery. He's threatening you because you're interfering with his ability to exploit vulnerable people. This is retaliation, and it's illegal." She sat across from him, her expression intense. "More importantly, I don't care what he threatens to say. I know the truth. You earned your position through talent and dedication. Our relationship is professional and appropriate. Anyone who knows either of us would never believe otherwise. But if there's even a perception, then we fight it," Eleanor interrupted. "We don't let bullies win by preemptively surrendering. We don't let criminals dictate our actions through intimidation. You taught me that, actually." Raymond looked confused. "What do you mean?" "When you gave me your meal at the diner, you had every reason not to," Elena said softly. "You were starving. Your daughter was watching. Someone might have judged you for enabling a homeless person, but you didn't care about those things. You did what was right because it was right." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm not going to let Marcus Thornton destroy you for doing good work. We're going to fight back, together." Raymond stared at their clasped hands, then up at Elena's determined face. He saw the same fierce protection in her eyes that he felt whenever someone threatened Sophie. "What do we do?" he asked quietly. Elena smiled, and it wasn't kind. "We go to war." Over the next week, Elena's legal team assembled a comprehensive case against Marcus Thornton and Thornton Properties. They filed complaints with the Oregon Department of Justice for tenant harassment, submitted evidence of code violations at 17 of his properties, and provided documentation of fraudulent eviction practices to the Portland District Attorney. Simultaneously, Eleanor reached out to 3 of her billionaire friends who owned major Portland media companies. Within days, investigative journalists were publishing exposés on Thornton's practices, interviewing families he'd displaced, documenting his pattern of exploitation. The public response was explosive. Portland's City Council announced an emergency investigation into Thornton properties. Tenant rights organizations filed class action lawsuits. Banks started declining to finance his projects due to reputational risk. Marcus Thornton's empire began crumbling. In desperation, Thornton made his threatened move. He called a press conference and claimed that Raymond Walker and Elena Taylor were engaged in an inappropriate relationship, that Raymond had received his position through personal rather than professional connections. Elena held her own press conference 3 hours later. Standing at a podium with Raymond beside her and Douglas Chen on her other side, Elena addressed a room full of reporters with calm, controlled fury. "6 months ago, I conducted a social experiment," she began. "For half a year, I disguised myself as a homeless woman and observed how people treated society's most vulnerable. In that time, thousands of people ignored me, insulted me, kicked me, and spat on me. 8 people showed me genuine kindness." She gestured to Raymond. Raymond Walker was one of those 8. When I met him, he was working a warehouse job, struggling to feed his daughter, and literally starving himself to provide for her. Despite his own desperate circumstances, he gave me his only meal, without hesitation. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. "When I learned about Raymond's situation and his character, I offered him a position with the Taylor Foundation, not because of anything inappropriate, but because I recognized that someone with his empathy, lived experience, and integrity was exactly who should be helping families in crisis." She turned to face the cameras directly. "In 5 months, Raymond has helped 150 families avoid homelessness, launched an award-winning support program, and become one of our most effective advocates. He's done this through talent and dedication, period. Marcus Thornton is attempting to destroy Raymond's reputation because Raymond's work is interfering with Thornton's ability to exploit vulnerable people for profit." Elena continued, her voice hard. "This is retaliation, witness intimidation, and defamation. We're filing a lawsuit against Mr. Thornton, and we're pursuing criminal charges for extortion." She paused, letting that sink in. "Let me be absolutely clear. I will not tolerate anyone threatening my employees for doing excellent work. I will not allow bullies to weaponize innuendo and lies. And I will not let someone who's displaced thousands of families lecture anyone about ethics." The press conference went viral. Within 24 hours, public sentiment had completely turned against Thornton. Within a week, the Oregon Attorney General announced criminal charges. Within a month, Marcus Thornton had lost his company, his reputation, and was facing trial. Raymond had been vindicated, but the experience had left him shaken. In the aftermath of the Thornton situation, Raymond and Elena found themselves spending more time together. Elena stayed in Portland for 3 weeks, ostensibly to support the office during the crisis, but increasingly because she didn't want to leave. They fell into a pattern of working late together, grabbing dinner to discuss foundation projects, talking for hours about their shared passion for helping others. Their conversations ranged from policy details to personal stories, from strategic planning to philosophical debates about justice and compassion. One evening, they were sitting in Raymond's office long after everyone else had gone home, Chinese takeout containers scattered across his desk, discussing a new housing program Raymond wanted to develop. "What if we bought apartment buildings ourselves?" Raymond was saying, his enthusiasm building. "Instead of just fighting bad landlords, we become the landlord, buy up buildings in low-income areas, renovate them, and rent them at affordable rates. Create permanently affordable housing that isn't subject to market exploitation." Elena listened, her chin resting on her hand, watching his face light up with passion. "That's ambitious and expensive." The foundation has the resources, Raymond countered, and the long-term impact would be massive. We could house thousands of families permanently, create stable communities, prove that affordable housing can be sustainable. You're not wrong, Eleanor said thoughtfully. It would require significant capital investment and a major operational expansion. But I like the vision. She paused, then added with a slight smile, You know, when I first hired you, I thought you'd be good at direct services, helping individual families. I didn't anticipate you'd turn into a policy innovator. Raymond laughed. I'm just a guy who lived in terrible apartments managed by terrible landlords. I know exactly what needs to change. That's what makes you brilliant at this, Elena said softly. You have lived expertise that no amount of education can replicate. Their eyes met across the desk, and the moment stretched. The air between them felt suddenly charged with something beyond professional respect. Raymond looked away first, clearing his throat. I should get home. Sophie's with Mrs. Patterson, but it's getting late. Right, Elena said, standing quickly. Of course. As Raymond packed up his things, Elena found herself not wanting the evening to end. Raymond, she said impulsively, would you and Sophie want to have dinner this weekend? Nothing work-related, just dinner. Raymond turned, surprise on his face. Like friends having dinner, Elena finished quickly. I'd like to get to know Sophie better, and I'd like to spend time with you outside of conference rooms and crisis management. A slow smile spread across Raymond's face. Sophie would love that. So would I. Saturday evening arrived, and Elena picked them up in her car, not the company Tesla or the chauffeured SUV, but her personal vehicle, a modest Honda Accord that made Raymond laugh. What? Elena protested. I like practical cars. You're a billionaire driving a Honda, Raymond grinned. That's very on-brand for someone who spent 6 months pretending to be homeless. Dinner was at a family-friendly Italian restaurant in northwest Portland. Sophie was initially shy around Elena, but warmed up quickly when Elena started asking about her favorite subjects in school and what books she was reading. I like science, Sophie said enthusiastically. We're learning about space and planets. Did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons? I did not know that, Eleanor said seriously. That's fascinating. Do you think you want to be a scientist when you grow up? Sophie nodded vigorously. Or maybe an astronaut, or a doctor like my mum was. Raymond's expression flickered with old pain, but Sophie continued without noticing. Dad says I can be anything I want if I work hard. He says that's what you did. You worked really hard and now you help people. Your dad is right, Elena said, glancing at Raymond with warmth in her eyes. And your dad is one of the hardest working people I know. You're lucky to have him. I know, Sophie said, reaching over to squeeze Raymond's hand. He's the best. After dinner, they walked along the waterfront as the sun set over the Willamette River, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Sophie ran ahead, chasing birds and examining interesting rocks, while Raymond and Elena strolled together. Thank you for this, Raymond said quietly. Sophie needs normal moments like this. So do I. So do I, Elena admitted. My life is usually meetings and flights and hotel rooms. This is nice. Really nice. They walked in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Elena said, Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever think about dating again? After your wife? Raymond was quiet, considering. For a long time, no. I was just surviving, and I couldn't imagine having emotional space for anyone else. And I worried about Sophie, about introducing someone into her life who might leave. That makes sense, Eleanor said. But lately... Raymond trailed off, then met her eyes. Lately I've been thinking about it. Eleanor's heart rate picked up. Oh? Before Raymond could respond, Sophie came running back. Dad, Elena, look at this cool rock. It has sparkles. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. Over the next 2 months, Raymond and Elena's relationship deepened. They had dinner regularly, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with Sophie. They texted throughout the day, sharing articles and ideas and small moments. Elena found herself thinking about Raymond constantly. His kindness, his integrity, his passion for justice, the way he loved his daughter with such fierce devotion. He made her laugh. He challenged her thinking. He saw her as Elena, not as the billionaire CEO. Raymond was falling just as hard. Elena's intelligence and drive inspired him, but what captivated him was her fundamental goodness, the way she'd spent 6 months living on streets to understand poverty, the way she fought for people she'd never met, the way she treated Sophie with genuine affection and respect. But both of them were terrified to acknowledge what was happening. Eleanor worried about the power dynamic. She was Raymond's employer, and she'd provided him with life-changing opportunities. How could she be sure any feelings he had were genuine and not influenced by gratitude or obligation? Raymond worried about the wealth gap. He'd gone from barely surviving on $16.50 an hour to a comfortable $78,000 salary. But Elena was worth $3.2 billion. They came from different worlds. What could he possibly offer someone who had everything? The tension finally broke on a rainy evening in February. Elena had come to Portland for a foundation board meeting. Afterward, she'd stopped by Raymond's office to discuss an agenda item, but they'd ended up talking about nothing work-related, just stories and jokes and easy conversation. When Elena finally stood to leave, it was past 8 p.m. and raining hard outside. "Let me drive you to your hotel," Raymond offered. "You'll get soaked." In Raymond's car, with rain drumming on the roof and the windows fogging up, they sat in the parking lot of Elena's downtown hotel. Neither moved to get out. "I don't want to leave," Elena said quietly. "I don't want you to," Raymond replied. Elena turned to face him. "Raymond, I need to say something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. Do you feel obligated to spend time with me because I gave you this job?" Elena asked, her voice vulnerable. "Because you're grateful? Because if that's what this is—" "No," Raymond interrupted firmly. He reached over and took her hand. "Elena, you changed my life. I will always be grateful for that. But that's not why I want to be around you." "Then why?" she whispered. "Because you see people," Raymond said, his voice thick with emotion. "You see their value and their potential when everyone else looks through them. You fight for strangers because it's right. You knelt down to talk to my daughter like she was the most important person in the world." He squeezed her hand. "You're brilliant and driven, and you use your power to help people instead of control them. You make me want to be better. You make me laugh. And when you walk into a room, everything feels lighter." Tears were streaming down Elena's face. "I was terrified you only saw me as your boss, as the person who saved you." "You didn't save me," Raymond said gently. "You gave me an opportunity, but I saved myself. And you. Elena, you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Not because of your money, because of who you are." They stared at each other in the dim interior of the car, rain creating a cocoon of sound around them. "I'm falling in love with you," Elena said, her voice barely audible. "I already have," Raymond replied. They kissed in the rain-soaked car, tentative at first, then deeper, 6 months of suppressed feelings breaking free. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "This is complicated," Elena said, her forehead resting against his. "I know," Raymond agreed. "People will talk. They'll say I'm your sugar mama or that you're taking advantage." "Let them talk," Raymond said firmly. "I know the truth. You know the truth. That's what matters." Eleanor pulled back to look at him seriously. I don't want this to affect your job. If we do this, we need to be completely professional at work. I don't want anyone to question your competence or achievements. Agreed, Raymond said. At work, you're my boss. Outside of work, you're... What are you outside of work? Elena smiled, tears still on her cheeks. I'm yours, if you'll have me. Yes, Raymond said simply. Yes. Raymond and Elena kept their relationship quiet at first, wanting to establish a solid foundation before facing public scrutiny. They navigated the complicated dynamics carefully, maintaining strict professionalism at work while building their personal relationship outside of office hours. The most important consideration was Sophie. Raymond sat down with his daughter 3 weeks into his relationship with Elena, nervous about how she'd react. Sophie, I need to talk to you about something important, he said one evening after dinner. Is it about Elena? Sophie asked casually, not looking up from her homework. Raymond blinked in surprise. How did you... Dad, you smile at your phone when she texts, Sophie said with the withering wisdom of an 8-year-old. And you wear your nice shirt when you know she's going to be at the office. And you get all weird and happy after you have dinner with her. Raymond couldn't help but laugh. Okay, I guess I'm not subtle. How do you feel about it? Sophie looked up from her homework, her expression thoughtful. Do you love her? I think I do, Raymond admitted. Is that okay with you? Sophie was quiet for a moment, then said, Mom would want you to be happy. She told me that before she died, she said if anything happened to her, you should find someone who makes you smile again. Raymond felt his throat tighten with emotion. She said that? Sophie nodded. Eleanor is nice. She listens when I talk about space, and she makes you happy, so I think it's good. Raymond pulled his daughter into a tight hug. I love you so much, you know that. I know, Dad, Sophie said, hugging him back. Can Eleanor come to my science fair next week? With Sophie's blessing, Raymond and Elena's relationship grew stronger. Eleanor integrated into their lives gradually and naturally, attending Sophie's school events, having weekend breakfasts together, teaching Sophie to code on her laptop. 6 months into their relationship, Raymond met Elena's mother, Susan Taylor, who still lived in the small Oakland apartment where Elena had grown up. Susan immediately loved Raymond, recognizing in him the same humble integrity that had driven Elena's success. You're good for her, Susan told Raymond privately during their visit. She needs someone who knew her when she was poor, someone who won't let her forget where she came from. At work, Raymond continued excelling. His housing acquisition program launched successfully, with the Taylor Foundation purchasing and renovating 3 apartment buildings in its first year, providing permanent affordable housing for 180 families. Elena supported his professional growth while carefully maintaining appropriate boundaries. She pushed him to think bigger, to develop his leadership skills, to present at national conferences on innovative poverty solutions. Their relationship became public a year after it began, when they attended a foundation gala together. The announcement was met with some raised eyebrows and inevitable gossip, but the foundation board backed them completely, pointing to Raymond's documented achievements and the clear professional boundaries they maintained. 2 years into their relationship, Elena was having dinner at Raymond and Sophie's apartment, a larger 3-bedroom they'd moved into when Sophie needed more space, when Raymond disappeared into his bedroom and returned holding a small box. He knelt down in front of Elena, with Sophie watching from the doorway with a huge grin. Elena Taylor, Raymond said, his voice shaking slightly. 3 years ago, you walked into a diner in disguise and I gave you an egg sandwich. You changed my life, not just financially, but in every way that matters. You taught me that my voice matters, that my experiences have value, that I can make a difference. You love my daughter like she's your own. You make me laugh every single day, and I cannot imagine my life without you. He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Elena was crying, nodding before she could speak. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Sophie ran over and wrapped her arms around both of them, and the three of them sat on the living room floor, crying and laughing and holding each other. Raymond Walker Taylor stood on the stage at the Portland Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 2,000 non-profit professionals, foundation directors and social workers who'd gathered for the National Conference on Poverty Solutions. "5 years ago," he began, "I was working a warehouse job, skipping meals to feed my daughter and facing eviction. I was invisible to most of the world, just another poor person that society had written off. Then I did something simple. I gave my breakfast to someone who needed it. That single act of kindness changed the trajectory of my entire life, not because it was extraordinary, but because someone with power and resources chose to see me, to value me, to invest in my potential." He gestured to the front row, where Eleanor sat next to Sophie, now 11 years old, and their 2-year-old son, Marcus, named ironically after the man who'd tried to destroy Raymond, who'd ended up in prison for fraud. "I'm here today not to tell you my story is special," Raymond continued. "I'm here to tell you there are millions of people just like who I was. Intelligent, capable, hard-working people who are invisible because of economic circumstances. They don't need saving. They need opportunities. They need someone to see their value. The question we must ask ourselves is, who are we not seeing? Whose potential are we overlooking? What would be possible if we invested in people instead of dismissing them?" The audience gave him a standing ovation. After the speech, as Raymond was surrounded by people wanting to discuss his programs, Eleanor stood back and watched her husband with pride and love. A woman approached her, another conference attendee who recognized Elena. "You two are relationship goals," the woman said with a smile. "The billionaire who saw past the poverty to the person underneath. It's like a fairy tale." Elena shook her head gently. "It's not a fairy tale. Raymond was already extraordinary. He just needed a chance to show it. I didn't save him. I just stopped being one of the people who was blind to his value." She looked over at Raymond, who was gesturing animatedly while explaining his housing program to a group of city officials, Sophie standing beside him with a proud smile. "He's saved himself," Eleanor said softly. "I just bought him breakfast."